Hi, I'm Suyen and I'm Clinical Director of Future Health Systems at Singapore General Hospital. And welcome to the SGH Hospital of the Future podcast. We have a very exciting topic today on 3D printing. And we have my co-host, Dr. Mark Tan, who is a clinical lead of the SGH 3D Printing Center. And we're very privileged to have with us today our esteemed guest, Dr. Neha Sharma, who is from the University of Basel.
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Mark Tan. I'm the clinical lead of the Singapore General Hospital 3D Printing Center. I'm also a neuroradiologist with the Singapore General Hospital.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Neha Sharma. I'm the Deputy Director of the 3D Print Lab at University Hospital Basel.
So Dr. Neha, welcome to Singapore and thank you very much for spending this time with us. 3D printing is something that's very exciting and we really feel that that's where the direction that we want medical technology and hospital care to be going. Can you tell us a little bit more about your own journey with medical 3D printing?
Thank you for having me here. I mean, it's a pleasure for me to be in this whole innovation center that you have built in Singapore. Our journey in Switzerland actually started 10 years ago, or more or less, we started with small printers in our hospital because we saw a clinical need. Because using a technology for the betterment of our patients was something that we could easily see, and we wanted to implement or use digital technologies for our surgical planning and also for betterment of our patients. Over the years, we have worked with different kind of printers technology. We try to optimize our workflow depending upon patient needs. So it's been quite an interesting journey. We have learned a lot, we have grown a lot, and it's going more and more towards betterment of patients and betterment of treatment protocols for you.
So I was trying to understand, the concept of 3D printing, or that it's a type of additive manufacturing, right? Because if we think about how we used to construct things, it's kind of like if you start with a block of marble or a block of wood and you remove things, right?
Yeah.
And 3D printing and additive manufacturing sort of turns that upside down, isn't it? Because you lay things down sort of layer by layer. What do you feel in 3D printing in medicine or in hospital care? Is it something that's really limitless? And where do you feel that we've had the biggest impact on patient care so far?
I mean, you raise a very interesting point. If we compare 3D printing with subtractive manufacturing, which is basically you have a huge block of material and then you carve that material out of it, what you need. And what happens here, you are left with a lot of extra waste material. What do you do with that? So if you use 3D printing, it's more or less definitely what you only need to print, what is required. So on sustainability side, if you think from the manufacturing concept, you are way more better from economic points of view. And combining it with medicine. Medicine, I mean, if you see a patient anatomy, right? My structure, it's different to yours. So each of us are individually personalized in our own sense. And if we can use the technology of additive manufacturing, because it really brings in the capabilities of complex designs that you can create for your patients, or you can utilize this technology for personalization. So the real benefit that I see here, it's catering to the personalization of devices you can think about, or implants. That's something that we need in medicine. Gone are the days where one size fits all, like small, medium, large. We have been using our devices and trying to fiddle it around different patients. But with technologies, we can even make it a step further. My implant would be tailored to my needs. We are doing this in fashion designing, right? We are so particular with, okay, I need my tailor suit. So we are focusing more onto the outer experience, right? But why not we can use the same technologies to our own needs internally as well. So here 3D printing really brings in the huge benefit of personalization.
Yeah, I like the example that you raised before, that when in the past when you had, say, orthopedic hip implants, it only comes in 3 sizes, small, medium, large, and none of us come in exactly small, medium, large. And does this speak to you very personally I understand that you're trained as an oral maxillofacial surgeon. Do you have any stories to tell us about where you have really seen 3D printing make a big difference in the surgical outcomes or the patient experience of the patients that you treat?
Maybe this brings back to my journey, why I went into 3D printing as such, or why I was so fascinated about this technology. I did my training and residency training, everything. My surgical experience was in India. In India, we had a lot of patient pool, but we lacked on the access of technologies. And I wanted to see what I can do for my patients, like what is missing to make it even better. And Basel was a center point for technologies. And for me, it was like, okay, if I want to learn and bring something good for my patients, I should move over there. And when I moved, it was a journey of learning and also improving patient care. And it really got me really interested into how I can use these kind of technologies. So earlier, I used to plan my surgeries. You go into the operating theater, you see, okay, that's a tumor case, or you basically think live. But with using virtual surgical planning, I can already imagine, or I'm already aware, okay, that would be a surgical case I would be dealing with. And if as a surgeon or a young trainee, when you are into this learning process, you don't get so much apprehension about your case. You are already prepared. You go through this whole workflow before the surgery, then live there with, okay, what do you do now? So that was one point I would say which made me more confident as a surgeon also. And then it was also learning the technologies, because as surgeons, we are not trained in our surgical field, are not so much involved into technology learning. It's more, okay, we learn about surgical incisions or surgical practices, but technology is something learning. So when I started learning, it was a huge learning curve for me personally as well. I used to think, okay, here is the software. Softwares are usually designed for engineers. And how do you think about, okay, from an engineering mindset? And this was my journey of PhD in biomedical engineering. So I tried to understand the concepts of engineering and how I can bring that experience into my surgical specialty.
Wow, thank you, thank you. Can I ask Mark?
Yeah.
Mark, behind all the successful surgeons are the great radiologists, right? And what is your parallel story in why you find 3D printing so fascinating and have gone into it so deeply?
Well, maybe some definition. So basically 3D printing. Well, what is 3D printing? So basically 3D printing is your ability to make something, whatever you want, whenever you need it. And that is something that's really powerful and really important. So I think for some of us who are used to Star Trek, that's to us is a bit of a dream to have a replicator, the ability to have something in the palm of your hand when you need it. Or like some of us, we grew up with stories of Doraemon, your ability to have a little bag and you can pull anything out of the bag that helps you in a particular situation when you need it. Yeah, so I think what we saw at about 2015, I was a radiology trainee then. That is to say, like I'm in the reporting room, I'm reading my scans. I was realizing that the surgeons, they started to come to us to say, hey, we don't really need the scans, but what we need to have is a model. We want a model because we want to shape an implant to it. We want a model so that we can look at it and plan our surgeries better. And I sensed that these were really where the needs were coming from. Based on that, I was thinking, like, how does radiology evolve? How can we help our surgeons do what they want? There's a character called Q in James Bond. He helps James Bond. He really gives the surgeon, he really gives the clinician, and he helps the team with the tool that they need at a particular point of time. So I think it was all these things that kind of inspired me towards that. We enjoyed working as a team. I worked with the surgeons, and at the end of the day, like I want to be in a position where I can put in the clinician's hand something that they need to help the patient. In Basel, how do you use 3D printing? How is clinical 3D printing used?
In Basel, we have our print lab established directly next to the operating theater. The idea was basically that surgeons going to the operating room should have direct access to our print lab. And this was also like a platform we created for easier communication between the engineering team or also the surgeons. The frequent exchange can happen, and imagine you have a lab in one corner of the hospital and the operating theater into the other. So it takes a huge effort, but handling this kind of a logistic, it really streamlined our communication platforms, I would say. So depending upon the need, initially we started with craniomaxillofacial surgery because I'm a craniomaxillofacial surgeon and my boss is also. So our driving need was from that specialty. But later on, when different other surgeons. We would go to the OR with our anatomical models and imagine we had a case with neurosurgeon or with orthopedic. They would really get excited. Oh, what do you have there? Okay, how does it look? Can I get one for mine as well? And that's how the interaction started. And they would come to our lab and they would discuss, okay, maybe I have a tumor case happening next week. Can you print this? What we are still trying to improve is sometimes it's like, yeah, you have a 3D printer, you can just print, right? And I need the model like now. But no, model of a pelvis now within one day, it's a bit difficult. So we also had to manage the expectations of the surgeons. Like, okay, if we want to support you, but if it's a pelvis, it won't happen within 1 or 2 hours. We need a bit of lead time as well. So a lot of communication usually happens, and surgeons, they usually get an understanding once they understand the workflow. Okay, yeah, my need is, okay, it cannot happen like you just click and print. You need to understand, okay, it's a technology which needs to print something. So this was something, a learning curve also from our side, being a service provider for the print lab, but also from the communication or understanding of the surgeons or the whole community.
You did your PhD really in the University of Basel on 3D printed implants. You really saw the journey of developing the implant and implanting it into an actual patient. I'm just wondering, how did that go for you?
So yeah, the journey is, for me, it's very personal because background is surgical specialty. So in the end, I want to see what I do should benefit the patient. So my PhD was on point of care printing of peak patient specific implants. On the title wise, it sounds like, okay, you just have a printer, you have a material and you print. But during this whole PhD plan, I got to know about, okay, you also need to optimize the printer parameters. You have to think about design consideration. You have to consider the material properties, because in the end, it's an implant that needs to be considered from the manufacturing point of view as well. And during my PhD, I also realized, okay, even if the implant is ready, we have to somehow ensure that we are compliant with the regulations as well. Because if you see personally, I wasn't okay with the implant I printed. Like, will I use it if it's my family member, right? How can I be so sure? And the PhD was actually like 4 to 5 years, but the regulations, it really took us a bit of time, like 2 to 3 years to handle the regulations from the MDR perspective. It was also a learning phase because as a hospital or as a surgeon or biomedical engineer, we don't speak that kind of a language. And what kind of things you need to do, we are also not aware. So that was another kind of a journey. But for me, it was okay. It's like one hurdle. We really need to figure that out, because for me, the drive was really, really strong. I want to get that implant into a patient, and it should be something better meant for them. The drive, sometimes I also feel research projects, they are done, but they don't see the light for the translation phase. But if you have a drive that, okay, you want to do a research that really benefits, which you really, no matter what hurdles you come, you somehow overcome it.
Yeah. I hear you on that point of translation, because in medical 3D printing, so first of all, with radiology, the ability to take a picture of a patient's insights already is very transformative, right? And when we used to show patients their scans and then they understand, they see their own anatomy. And we said, right, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And now we have this ability to have a model of the patient's own anatomy. And I think that although we talked about the role of 3D printing in virtual surgical planning or in surgical guides and surgical implants, I think it's also very powerful that the work that the two of you do also gives us the ability to let patients handle that part of the anatomy so they understand, I'm going for surgery. This is what the tumor looks like, This is where my surgeon is going to approach it from. And they can visualize it and you can visualize it. And I think that it's almost beyond words, the ability to see that. It's hard for us to look at a CT scan and understand it. And Mark's going to show us now an example of that.
Yeah, so in the 3D printing center, one thing that we do a lot of is to build patient-specific models from the medical imaging. So this is an example of one. So this is the chest wall, and there is this tumor that's on the chest wall that's over here. So this helps the patient and it helps the surgical team in three ways. The first way is in communication. I think at the end of the day, medicine is all about communication. For the patient to understand how the patient's condition is, it's also for the clinical team to understand within itself how to treat the patient so that everybody's really on the same page. So say when I have this model, this is like a very large tumor, and this is the chest wall. When the patient sees it, the treatment had to take place, was communicated very well. We were able to let the patient understand how the whole team was going to be behind him. Models also help in communication. So over here, you see that you're certain, you see this model is detachable. And for this to take place, what happens is that the surgeon needs to be able to define how to make the cuts to remove the tumor safely with enough room around it that they make sure that all the tumor is out. And everybody has to know this. The cardiothoracic surgeon has to know this. The anesthesiologist needs to know that, okay, this is pressing so much on the lung. We have to make sure that this is accounted for. The oncologist, at the end of the day, he realizes that, okay, this is what is done. And really, every member of the surgical team would be able to know that. And the third thing that we kind of see with models is what we call the aha moment. When a scan is done, sometimes it's very difficult to really visualize it. But since being able to look at something, touch something, we've really seen the surgeons have a bit of the aha moment to say, yes, this is how the surgery is going to be done. And this is something that's really kind of borne out by studies. Just having a model actually changes the surgical approach or the way the surgery is done.
Can you share with us the SGH experience so far? The surgical team in the planning stage has access to tools like 3D printing and visualization. What sort of impact does it have on operating time and the surgeon's experience and the patient's experience?
Yes, that's a good question. So maybe one example that I'd like to talk about is a case that we did with Dr. Henry Sohano, who's a musculoskeletal oncological surgeon. He is a surgeon who removes bone tumors away from the bone. And this is one case that we all planned together, the clinicians, the engineers, and the radiologists as well. This is like your femur, which is like your upper leg. There is this part over here that sticks out. And you can see this little red line here. So this is a blood vessel, and there's a nerve behind this. So the challenge that the surgeons face is that they want to be able to make a very accurate cut that removes the tumor, but is away from the surrounding structures. We work very closely with the clinicians, with the engineers, and to come up with surgical guides. So these are pieces that are medical devices that are made and they are put on the bone and are fixed into place so the surgeon can make a very accurate cut. And this is important because it saves time during the operation. I think some of the studies that we see both with models and with guides save up to 30 to 60 minutes of operating time. And what this operating time means is that the patient is under anesthesia less, recovery time is faster. The operating theatre may become more efficient, meaning to say that you can treat more patients on the same day. And of course, you're able to have the tumor removed more accurately and with greater safety. So I think these are some of the benefits that surgical guides have been giving to patients.
May I ask about your experience in Basel? Is sort of patient-reported outcome measures or the patient experience something that you actively seek when in the work that your 3D printing lab does? Can you share with us some of the, whether it's anecdotal feedback or some of the parameters that are important?
There are certain examples that still I remember, from what Mark already said, like patients and even surgeons, they are very haptic. And taking a model is something which increases patient consent. It's an informed consent, but it increases their acceptance towards surgery. But one thing I also realized that some of our patients, they actually wanted to have that model of their own tumor taken back home with their surgery. It's a memorable kind of a thing for their journey that maybe that they overcome. But we often get these kind of requests as well, like, can I get my this model or a tumor? Was in the beginning, it was something we didn't expect, like, okay, we are in the hospital or a patient would ask for this. But we are more than happy to give, okay, that's a part of your journey, and yeah, that's how your case was treated. But having these colored models or simple illustration, not just onto the X-ray scans, something that increases the patient's reporting or conformity. And because we discuss these kind of with 3D printed models, the follow-ups, they get easier. The patient who has been treated with the patient-specific implant, or where we show, okay, that would be a treatment with such a model, the follow-up reporting, or they are more compliant towards these kind of treatments. So this is something I realized. Otherwise, it was very hard to get like follow-up patient has their own life, and till no complication occurs, they usually don't report. But once we show, okay, this would be a technology that we will be using, and it increases their compliance towards follow-up. And as 3D printing, it's a new technology. As a hospital or as a surgeon, it's also our responsibility to see what has been done towards the treatment of the patient. How is it going? One, on the patient perspective, okay, everything is on track, healing is better, but also in generating the evidence for this technology to be applied to different regions of the world as well. Because if I see insurance, they would like to see, okay, what is the benefit? And if we don't have any data, again, talking into the language that insurance wouldn't understand, it's all about numbers, it's all about reporting. So as a responsibility of a surgeon, we are doing three things. We can have patient reporting as a follow-up back, which gives us about the assessment of the quality of life or complication surgical part. But we also are increasing awareness from the whole world. And then we are also generating data for the insurance so that these technologies can be integrated into the insurance system or can be provided more easily to other people as well.
Yeah, so Neha, I think like I find in my work, I work very closely with radiographers. I work very closely with engineers. I work very closely with surgeons, and even with researchers and industry and different people. How has that experience been for you in the clinic? I mean, you're a clinician, but you also you have there are lots of other things you have to know in the work that you do.
I work with clinicians, researchers, engineers, people from industry, regulators, and policymakers. And to communicate, the challenge that is you have to understand what language they speak or they understand, and how can you convince them. So it's a real talent or also a learning curve. As for me, it was like a learning curve, I would say. Like, okay, how can I bridge this gap? One person is talking A and then you are understanding B. Some examples I can give you. So, okay, a surgeon comes to the lab, okay, there is a tumor, I need to remove the tumor. Okay, there's a tumor on the leg. He goes back, because that's usually the time a surgeon would have to quickly drop by and tell about the case. An engineer says, okay, there's a tumor. He designs a cutting guide, right? And now the engineer wouldn't know, okay, what the surgical approach would be, right? So it's a design which you cannot use into the clinical workflow. But the time has been spent and guide has been printed. A surgeon comes back, okay, this is not what I wanted. It was something else, right? So it's always like a communication. So engineers need to understand also the surgical specialty or the needs. Okay, if I'm designing something, will it be clinically used? And surgeons also needs to understand, like, yeah, it's a person from engineering background, which currently wouldn't have the niche specialty or the knowledge of your specialty. So it's the communication. Okay, sometimes you need to sit together, you need to discuss maybe for one or two cases, and then it goes smoothly. And now a regulator would come. For them, it's a medical device, right? They wear a different kind of a hat. They don't think about surgical incision. They don't think about the design. They think about, okay, how was it sterilized? Okay, how do you transport the guide from the lab to the sterilization? So it's a different kind of communication and logistics that you need to navigate and understand. But on one hand, it keeps your job very interesting. It's never monotonous. Every day could be a new situation in which you have to handle. And every day it's a new learning experience. It's not a monotonous job, but yes, it can be complex.
I echo what you say on certain of the points. So, for example, I think now in medicine, doctors have to work very closely with engineers and with people, and really they form part of the medical team. So, for example, in some cases that we work on, we have a defect in the chest wall that we need to develop a way to close it. So in this case, we work very closely with companies, engineers, and people with different talents, and bring them together towards patient care. Yeah, I feel this is one of the challenges of our time.
Yeah, because you need to be conversant in many different languages, right? You need to know the imaging language. They need to understand the surgical language and intent. And what I want to ask your expertise in is in material science. So where are we going? What are the frontiers that we are looking at for 3D printing? Can you tell us a little bit more about metal versus PEEK versus what we currently have?
So on materials used inside the body, if you see the market, we have various options.
Yes.
Yes. You have metals, you have polymers, you have ceramics, you have compositions of each other. And as a surgeon, if you were to decide, it's not, one kind of material would be adapted throughout the body. The material choice that we use is driven by the clinical need. It doesn't make sense to have a cranial implant of a metal, which is very, very thick, because it's a non-load-bearing region. You don't have loads. And if you print a cranial implant, for example, in the metal, it's very thick. It's a huge bulk of metal on your head. And patients always complain about either if you are in a colder region, like it's very cold, and if you are in a hotter region, like Singapore or even in India, where you have temperatures like 50 degrees, then you really get like a hot metal on your head. So one driving force of materials used inside the body is, okay, what is the clinical application, where it would be, whether do we need such kind of a material, or how it would adapt to the clinical scenarios. Another thing that we use in our experience or in the print lab, it's considering, like Mark showed, an anatomical model. Now we have different kind of printers that print, from economic printers to very expensive printers. But if you're thinking from a hospital point of view or a sustainable ecosystem, yes, those fancy models, definitely they look very cool. But it's also a lot of infrastructure, and it's a lot of investment that you need to do for just 1 minute thing that you want to really achieve. In that kind of scenario, it's always at least in Basel, what we do, we decide, whether this small case or certain scenario can be handled with a economical kind of a solution, right? Where we don't need all the muscles or all nerve. It's just a tumor region. You show that in red, and the rest of the material can be easily printed in a cost-effective material. But if it's a simulation kind of a study, or practices where we want to really train our surgeons for simulations rather than using cadavers, because cadavers are really expensive. In that kind of a scenario, it really makes sense that we can replicate those kind of models with all the realistic features of a human anatomy, because it not only improves their surgical specialty, and it really, you can dive into the cost effectiveness of that muscle. So yeah, depending upon materials, I wouldn't say there is not even one printer that you buy and it solves all your problem, and there is not even one material that you can use within your whole body that solves everything. It's a mix and match. You depend upon your clinical needs and you adapt to your needs.
I'd like to ask you about what we always see as, sort of a dream state. One day, can we print organs? Can we print skin? What about bioprinting? What are your views on that?
Bioprinting is really fascinating field. You have options to create, at least the vision is there, that one day we can create organs or realistic bones. In Basel, initially we started with, you call it researchers or at least the regulators, dry cell printing. So basically dry printing without any cells. But now we have also established our bioprinting lab. And the idea is one day that we can have, starting with a small scaffold, at least we can have properties that the construct could generate, like a bone or a cartilage regeneration kind of things. I wouldn't say like it's ready. Yes, tomorrow we can use a bioprinted construct for bone reconstruction, but it's a field where you have a lot of options, and a lot of things can be innovative in that field. You can combine it with different kind of materials. You can tweak the printing parameters depending upon, okay, maybe that's a structure replicating the bone. You can combine it with different kind of stem cells or mesenchymal cells into it. And the regeneration of that construct could also be complemented with, okay, maybe the bone construct of an elderly person doesn't need to withstand those kind of loads, but for a younger patient, it's a different kind of anatomy. So it's a really fascinating field, and a lot of research still needs to be done on that. Yeah.
How far away do you
Okay.
think we are, from being able to come to a clinic and say, "Oh, I went skiing, I've torn my anterior cruciate ligament. Can you print me a new ligament?" Do you think we're going to see that in 5 years, 10 years?
10 years?
10 years maybe?
10 years?
So Mark, we'll take you up on that. Where do you see SGH 3D printing going? What is your next frontier, and what else do you think we should be doing?
I'll answer your question about bioprinting. I mean, there's always been a dream to be able to print organs, or be able to replace organs more easily in the hospital. This is the field of regenerative medicine and regenerative surgery. I hope to see this happen during my lifetime. But for this to happen, it needs hospitals, it needs society, it needs a biomedical ecosystem to be able to be more sophisticated, to communicate among each other, for really the basic researchers, for the engineers, for the doctors to really understand each other, to develop pathways for this to happen, and for us to develop better tools. I think from the role of the hospital, what are some steps that we could do? We should inform basic science. We should we should be very close to our scientists to provide the knowledge that they need to bring this forward. We need to be able to speak with the regulators and to be in a position where promising technologies can be onboarded, but in a way that does no harm, because we are doctors first, and our principle is first to do no harm. Within that, to be able to find pathways that allow new developments and new science to be brought to the forefront for patient care. So I think at the end, it's a lot of communication, there's a lot of people, communities knowing each other, and really building the future together.
So Mark, you spent some time in Basel.
Yes, I did.
In recent years. What are some of your major gains and knowledge or takeaways from your time spent there?
One main takeaway of my time in the University of Basel Hospital, where I was a fellow with the 3D printing lab, was to be able to see the integration between engineers and clinicians working together side by side for clinical care, to do complex work in the hospital, such as implant printing, such as the development of surgical guides which are custom. It really needs the capabilities of engineers and doctors and radiologists to be at the same table, to understand each other and to work side by side. Maybe something else to add is the ability and the capacity to dream the possible. I think that was something that took away. I find that the environment was very dynamic. It was one which was not static and accepting the status quo. It was one which had dreams and aspirations to really be at the forefront of patient care in this particular field, and be at the forefront to push the boundaries. And I think it's this sort of spirit that is really important going forward. The third thing I found is that as we work together in teams, as we aim to do very innovative, very cutting-edge things, we still ground this in patient care. We still ground this in patient care. We still ground this in the principle to do things safely, in a proper system, and in line with accepted regulations. I think it's really this mix of factors that come together that I took away from my time in Switzerland.
So obviously you have inspired Mark a lot. Can you share with us maybe one of the biggest challenges that you have faced and one of the biggest joys that you have so far in your career in medical 3D printing?
So in medical 3D printing, my biggest joy is providing care for the patient. So this personalization and customized approach towards a patient care That's my biggest joy. When I see the patients getting operated with implants or any kind of medical devices which is 3D printed, and they go back quicker to their home, their surgery gets really without any complications, that's the biggest joy. Now, challenges, right? Challenges are, because it's a very dynamic system, like Mark said, you have to have different kind of stakeholders into this whole system. It's not like one surgeon job or a one engineer job. It's the communication between different teams. It's managing expectations between teams. And how do you navigate that? That is a challenge, which I'm still learning into. And some things I have already improved, but I see a lot of things coming up in the future as well. Like, okay, when we go into talking about sustainability of this point of care manufacturing in the long term, those are some bigger challenges that I anticipate.
So, Mark, that doesn't look like a bone or a thorax. What exactly is that 3D printed item that you're holding?
So this is what you call a wrist hand orthosis. So this is something that you would put on your hand if you have a wrist injury. This can be 3D printed, and what this means is that in the traditional way of making these orthotics, these were used to be molded by the prosthetist or orthotist to the hand, and they used to be heavy. They didn't used to be waterproof. Now, what we know about our materials nowadays is that we are able to actually now make these orthoses in such a way that are lighter, they are waterproof, and we also can bring patients into the process. So in this case, there's a little opening here because in case of a patient with needs dialysis, there are certain modifications that can be made to the devices. But what does this actually mean? It means that there are a lot of different groups in the hospital that need to be able to learn new skills. So what we've been trying to reach out to is for really our prosthetists and orthotists to learn new digital design skills. It means having capabilities within the hospital to produce these quickly, or to actually leverage upon our larger ecosystem in Singapore to be able to work with partners to be able to do the work within the hospital, to do work outside the hospital that we can't do inside the hospital. Trying to find really the best fit for every particular project. Yeah, so I think the story behind really bringing prosthetics or orthotics in this particular piece is one of being able to develop new things within the hospital in a safe way, and in a way in which everyone in the hospital has knowledge about new technologies. I think these are some of the challenges, not only in 3D printing, but also in every other field of medicine that we see going forward.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. And so today we've talked about medical 3D printing across an entire spectrum, ranging from virtual surgical planning to surgical implants, to different types of materials, how this has kind of traversed the conversations between radiology and imaging and surgeons and biomedical engineers and material science. And I think at the end of the day, I think we all agree that actually what it really is about, which Mark has just talked about, the customization, and you've used the word personalization and personalized medicine very much in our conversation today, is that the entire purpose of the medical 3D printing has been about customizing what the patient needs when the patient needs. And I really like it, Neha, that you brought the point about point of care medical additive manufacturing. Not just that it's no longer a manufacturing facility that's in a different country or, down a highway somewhere else, and not just in the hospital itself, but actually literally, for example, in the operating theater. You are actually printing it out, working on it and printing it out just next to where the patient is going to get the implant. And I think that's redefined some bars for us to aim for. So
one thing that I realized in Singapore, like I met so many different people from your health ministry, engineers, researchers over there, clinical directors. One thing that really struck me is your openness. The culture is very open, it's very diverse, and it's very patient-centric approach in the hospital system that I already can feel the vibes. And you have a drive towards innovation. This is one take that I feel like, okay, that's my impression about 2 days. And I really want to be part of this journey with you. We will be signing our memorandum of understanding, and I'm really looking forward to it.
As we are. On behalf of Mark and myself and SGH Hospital of the Future podcast, we really want to thank Dr. Neha for joining us today for this session. And we really hope you enjoyed your time in Singapore.